Welcome to the JD Bunkis podcast. Two quick things that I want to say on my own before I get to James Mirtle this morning. I have Jim Bowden on today. He's awesome. Knows many things. And I'm going to ask him a ton of Blue Jays questions and a couple things that are going on around baseball right now, the dominoes that are falling. Weirdly, a lot of guys are opting into qualifying offers. I didn't expect Imanaga to do that. I certainly didn't expect Trent Grisham to do that. And obviously the first guy was Shane Bieber. And to me, the way that these guys have acted, it actually quells some of the uncomfortableness around the Bieber opt-in and the silence from his camp about why he decided to leave money on the table, why he essentially took $12 million to remain a Toronto Blue Jay on a one-year contract. But one of the guys that did not opt in was Bo Bichette, obviously. I would have said that about all these guys, though. But Bo Bichette didn't opt in. He's heading to market. He declined his $22 million, and he is a free agent. There is obviously a path that the Blue Jays can take that does not include Bo Bichette. That is a home run offseason. People are ginned up about the idea that they could land multiple impact players and augment a team that made it to the World Series in a way that has people unbelievably excited heading into the regular season. I happen to be one of those people who is on the more excited side of the ledger. That despite the argument that people who are smarter than me and who know far more than me have made, which is a World Series appearance actually allows the front office to be more themselves, to say that their plan works and that they should not go outside those valuations, that they should not let emotion dictate some of what they do with their spending. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like what this team has actually exhibited in the past, which is a willingness to not only just increase the budget, but take shots when they have those opportunities. They did it coming out of COVID when they were one of the first teams to say, nope, we're going to be fine financially. We're not going to treat this like we're broke. You didn't see Rodgers having interviews the way that the Cubs owner did, or I think it was the Reds owner, where they were like, we're so poor, we can't even afford a baseball team, and yet they weren't selling. They've taken their shots. And to me, it would be very disconnected from the boots on the ground to go into this offseason and nibble around the fringes, add a seventh inning guy, add a infielder that isn't Bo Bichette, and add a starting pitcher that slots in as their number 4 and call it a day. Obviously, they're looking higher in the starting pitching market right now. I think that everybody is basically acknowledging that. That's an insider. But you know how these things can go. And maybe they strike out on a couple of those guys because, again, to me, there's a pretty steep decline in starting arms after the first couple of names. Then you're getting into the territory of, okay, it's a nice piece. That's a sustainable piece. But are you certainly better than what you were last year in terms of your depth? I'm not sure of that. There's a real hype. There's a real excitement for the Blue Jays, and there is a desperate hunger for this team to be competitive again next year and get to the postseason and prove that this wasn't just like a one-off fluke from the fan base. They want their revenge. And no, spending big money on free agents doesn't necessarily promise that. Look at the Mets. They were the team that went out and got Soto. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They ended up paying for Pete Alonso. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They had Edwin Diaz, the number 1 closer on the market. They did not make the playoffs this year. So I'm not saying that there are not alternative paths, but there is something to be said about keeping them in the news cycle in a very positive way and having this build to spring ball in February be a, a storyline that continues throughout this and keeps people engaged. And with that, I would say I've alluded to this, but I'll go with this today. I don't really understand the outside optics of the Bo Bichette situation. If the Blue Jays are, as some executives believe them to be, the favorites to land Kyle Tucker, then I get it. If you're going, if you're telling me that you think Kyle Tucker is the better long-term fit for the Toronto Blue Jays and that you are willing to be at the very top of his market and deciding to be hyper aggressive when it comes to this player, I get not locking Bo Bichette in. So, by all accounts, they're in on Tucker. They're a team that's going to take calls and they're going to explore the option there. And to me, it actually kind of feels a little, as much as I am emotionally attached to Bo Bichette, and I lived those moments just like you did of the Bo chance when he returned and the home run in Game 7 and some of the clutch RBIs that he had in that World Series. It does remind me a little bit, if they get to Kyle Tucker, that's the caveat, they got to get to Kyle Tucker, of when Robbie Ray won the Cy Young and they replaced him with Kevin Gausman. Because at that time, there were a lot of people, and I don't remember exactly where I was on this, but that felt a little uncomfortable not trying to extend Robbie Ray, not being as aggressive with Robbie Ray. He was unbelievable for them that year. Again, he won the Cy Young, so obviously. But with Bo, he obviously wants to be here. And I'm going to talk to Bowden about what his market looks like because at this point, it still feels very murky. I have not seen teams linked to Bo Bichette in a concrete way. I still haven't seen what the framework of a deal really looks like for this guy. We still don't even seem to have a full understanding of how many teams would pay him to be a shortstop. But it feels like a little bit of an overthink to me. The idea that you would be in his market and that you would be letting him explore, that you would be letting him field offers from other teams and taking a pretty massive risk in letting him walk and not landing Kyle Tucker and replacing him with a third baseman from Japan who does not hit pitching that is of any major league velocity. Like very few guys in Major League Baseball throw under 94 miles per hour, and that's what that guy struggles with. Or even a Jorge Polanco, who was a a postseason hero for the Seattle Mariners. He's not Bo Bichette. This team got to the World Series without Bo. I would have my doubts that they could get back there without an impact back like him. And that if you're looking at negative regression for some of the players next year that overperformed on that run, I would say, okay, but if you factor in a healthy Bo Bichette, what would that have made you? And so I think these next couple of months, because that's what it's going to take to get this settled, or at least a month, are going to be pretty uncomfortable. And that the Blue Jays are curious in their decision, at least again, optically from the outside, not to be more aggressive with a player who has a foundation here, who loves to play here, who fits well with their roster, especially if he moves over to second base. And again, I guess that hasn't been fully cleared up. But man, it's going to be a really tough look if they end up pushing their chips in the middle for a Kyle Tucker miss and then can't back pivot to Bo Bichette. Just saying. Quickly, and I'll bring in Mirtle. Brad Treliving spoke yesterday, and he had a bunch of nice quotes. Brad Treliving is a great speaker, and I will say this about him. I think he gets it. I don't get the sense, having met Treliving, having seen him speak countless times at this point, that he is in any way disingenuous. My feel, personally, is that he understands the frustrations of the fan base. He comprehends the job and the gravity in which he stepped into. And when he says things like this team is vanilla and talks about the roster the way that he did yesterday, which was not in glowing terms at all, talked about them being disconnected, talked about the effort level, that this wasn't some calculated ploy to try to satiate the fan base into saying, like, see, they get it, and now let's move on. No. That's when he says he's staying up at night and he can't sleep at night wondering why this isn't working. I believe him. When he has had conversations about this group trying to reconnect with the fan base and the overtaking that he's had with his team and some of the visions that he's had in terms of the ways that they want to play, I believe in him. In the sense of, I believe that he is saying something meaningful and he's not just doing it for himself. Because I don't want to name names in the sporting world, but there are certain guys where when they take to a microphone, it sounds really great, but also it comes off as a little egotistical. That really what they're talking about is them. And that's, again, not my perception of Brad Treliving. But the biggest thing for me yesterday was when he said, quote, as we sit here today, we're not where we want to be, where we envision to be. Obviously, we're underperforming at this point, and I take full responsibility. I'm in charge of the hockey department. I've put the people in place on the ice, off the ice, so the responsibility lies with myself, end quote. I think he's right. Certainly the players play. Certainly you're allowed to criticize the core players and the part that they have in this. But ultimately, Brad Treliving built this roster. And what he has done over the last 2 years is a far greater impact than anything Craig Berube is doing. And Berube has been in the eye of the storm lately. And I spoke about this yesterday, but I think a coaching change is a horrific look for this Leafs team. It's something that becomes inevitable if you can't turn the ship around. If you go through, as I said, this stretch ahead of American Thanksgiving where you face a bunch of really bad teams and it looks the same, you're not improving, you're not taking the baby steps that I think that we saw last night where they defended better and they got good goaltending and they were able to come up with 2 points. Wasn't a beautiful process by any stretch of the imagination, but they're injury riddled. And for a team that's just dying for a win, it's hard to be overly critical of that one. But it really, that media conference, which, by the way, was already pre-planned. It's a quarter of the season mark. Brad Treliving had always chosen to speak. Again, I don't think that this was some big calculated manipulation in order to try to shift the narrative or to change the blame onto him. But I will say that that is the byproduct for me, is I am thinking more about the levels of aggression that this guy could have taken. The levels of creativity that he should have had, some of the contracts that have been doled out for certain players. You're looking at this roster right now, and Dakota Joshua has term. Max Domi has term. They doled out term to Ryan Reeves. He's not here anymore, but Kampf, you go on down the line, there were a lot of misses in terms of what they were trying to do when it came to adding depth. Some of it was their hand was forced, like the Mitch Marner situation, but I would even argue that going to Mitch Marner at the trade deadline rather than the year prior and at least trying to explore that conversation during an offseason probably would have benefited them more than, or at least given them more of an outside shot of moving him before the doomsday scenario happened, which is what transpired here in Toronto. And so, again, I think Brad Treliving gets it, but my confidence in him being able to be the guy that actually changes it, I doubt that. I have my doubts. James Mirtle of The Athletic joins me now. What's up, James? How are we doing?
Hey, JD. How's it going?
Good. So, yeah, what was your read on yesterday? Like, did you have a prevailing takeaway from Brad Treliving's media conference?
I would say my takeaway was he was putting more pressure on the players, really, and just in how frank he was in talking about how disappointing they've been. The vanilla quote, I think, is the one that might stay from this press conference and that I think we might talk about for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. I mean, the team hasn't had energy. It hasn't looked like the way that they talked about it looking. It hasn't had the identity that they were thinking it was going to have. And it hasn't even had the identity that it had last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was my biggest takeaway, was that not necessarily Treliving trying to take pressure off of Berube or putting it on himself, but him really kind of throwing down the gauntlet to the players and saying, you guys haven't been good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, we get to the 40 game mark. I think the press conference is a little bit different, and it's going to be, if they still haven't been good enough, it's going to be shipping guys out, really.
this is the weirdest thing for me in terms of trying to project their season, right? And okay, things stay sort of relatively the same in the Eastern Conference. They're going to be around the playoff picture. And without controlling their first round pick, I have a really difficult time seeing them doing even a soft sell, given that it could hurt that stock and it doesn't really benefit them, right? Like outside of somebody overwhelming them for a player that they don't love or being able to take a contract off their hands that they think would be valuable for the future, right? Like say another team actually did covet Dakota Joshua and they went, you know what, we can get, what is he, 3.25 somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get 3.25 off the books for the next couple of seasons and you get some draft capital back, maybe a prospect or a lesser player, but somebody that changes the dynamic of your roster. Like, okay, but it's hard for me to kind of buy into that idea. The interesting thing that you said there about putting the pressure on the players is I just don't know what that effect actually has or what the messaging is, or like whether you think that a player like William Nylander or a player like John Tavares, that they were sitting at home yesterday and that they were watching Brad Treliving deliver these quotes and saying, oh man, like even our general manager sees it. Even he's acknowledging the stuff that's not working. Like, I guess I don't know what the impact is of any of that.
Well, the heat is being turned up in the market on the coach, right? And a lot of the conversations about the coach and about Pete DeBoer and all these kinds of things. And if Treliving comes out and says, hey, it's not the coach, we're not changing the coach, what it says to the players is, this isn't happening. You can't quit on this guy and we're not going to get rid of him. And like the Babcock thing, that's not going to happen. I think that's the message. The message is that it's on us in the room to figure this out.
So do you not view that though as a kiss of death then? You view that as like an actual...
Often it is. I mean, it depends if they win games or not, right? Like right. I think it's the same situation we were in with Babcock, where if they go on a huge, horrific losing skid and the players are all quitting on him and they have to do something, then maybe it's a kiss of death. But I think part of what Treliving's laying out there is that we're a long ways away from Berube going anywhere. You know, I've had people texting me around the league the last couple of days and saying, oh, if they lose this next game, is it going to happen? I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. It's not what's happening here. You know, Berube's got $10-11 million left on his contract. I don't think he's going anywhere right now. So part of what Treliving's doing is turning up the temperature on the players and turning it down on his coach and saying, I believe in what we're trying to do. He didn't become a bad coach overnight. And what's happening here isn't on him.
So I think that there's a lot of validity to that. I think that your read on it is sharp. All I would say is that these next few games, I outlined it on yesterday's show. They play Columbus twice, and they play Washington, they play Pittsburgh, they play Montreal, who's beat up. It's not a murderer's row schedule. And then they get into one that's a little bit more difficult. And it's hard for me to say if they go over this stretch and it doesn't look very good, that the move wouldn't be to fire the coach, that the move wouldn't be like, okay, we need to shake something up. And, you know, the $10-11 million, I would say that matters a lot more if it's in Florida. That matters a lot more if it's in a different market. It probably doesn't matter or impact things as much as Toronto, who would be looking to recoup that with playoff revenue and be saying, like, if we think that this is something that we can do that'll move the needle and get that dead cat bounce, then yeah, we're absolutely doing it. I guess, yeah, I thought Berube was essentially almost like a de facto AGM. You and I have talked about this throughout the offseason, that like they're really leaning on him when it comes to leadership structure. I think a lot of this has been unfairly put on him. But yeah, I just don't know how it could be that secure given where they are and how they're performing and how some of the players are responding.
I mean, I'm not saying it is secure. I'm saying that's what they want to project right now, 20 games into the season, that he's secure and that the players are the ones that are going to bear the responsibility. So that was my read of the press conference. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that that's part of what's happening here is that they want to move away from the headlines all being, you know, like I said, Pete DeBoer or who the coach could be and when is this going to happen? And every time they lose a game, it's going to be talked about. And if Treliving comes out and says it's not going to happen and it's on the players and we got to get this figured out, then that does turn the temperature down a little bit. And it helps that they win the game as well. Yeah.
Yesterday was a big win, man. Like that Blues team was awful. Like they did not look very good. I don't think that was very inspiring hockey that the two teams played. There's some positives that I have from the Leafs from it that I do want to go over with you. But to kind of close out this conversation, Yeah, the where it sort of led me after reading everything and sitting with it for close to 24 hours was when Tree Living said the thing about I built this hockey team. Like I put the players on the ice, I put the personnel around them. This ultimately lies with me. I'm the guy that stays up at night. And I went, you are the guy that built this hockey team. And sure, he was put in a very uncomfortable position when he came in for Dubas. A lot of assets were already out the door. They were in a position with a lot of no move clauses. Like, again, you can make all the excuses that you want, but ultimately, most of the moves that he has made have not really worked out for this team. Like, I was joking yesterday on the show, you go through the roster in terms of even being able to move out pieces if you wanted to do a soft sell, right? Like, say they get to this doomsday scenario. Max Domi has like a 13-team no trade clause. Like, why did you have to give Max Domi a no trade clause when you were paying him $4 million with term to play on the team that he's always wanted to play for? David Kampf had a no move clause. It's what in part made him more difficult to move and resulted in the divorce being as ugly as it ended up being. There have been bringing in Michelli so far has been a bust. Bringing in Dakota Joshua so far has been a bust. There hasn't been a lot of things that you can. The Brandon Carlo trade looks like an egregious overpay at this point. There's so many things that you can point to and say like, this was a miss, this was a miss, this was a miss, this was a miss, and very few things that you point to right now and go like, wow, he really nailed that. Like even the Tavares signing, that's amazing, but who views that as a Tree Living thing? That's a Tavares thing, right? You give him some credit in terms of not trying to get that extension done during the year last season and waiting for it to play out in free agency and kind of holding a firm line with that guy in terms of what they needed from him contractually. But it's still more Tavares that gets credit for this than it is Tree Living. And so the point of curiosity becomes, okay, they want to keep the coach and they're trying to quiet down the market in terms of the conversations about DeBoer and the things that you just mentioned. But do you get any sense, or is it way too early for you to even kind of predict something like this? But that there is enough faith in Tree Living that with a really bad season, like I'm talking miss the playoffs type season, a year that looks a lot like this and then maybe even results in a first round playoff exit, that he has long-term job security.
I don't think so. No. Do you? I think part of why he's being kept up at night is he doesn't have job security. I mean, you got a new reshaped ownership group coming in and the heat is dialed up on everybody in this organization. And I think if it's a brutal season, if they just stay on the pace that they're on right now and they finish, what are they, sixth last in the league right now? If they finish there, I think a lot of people are gone in the organization. So, I mean, the stakes are really high for Tree Living too. This probably isn't an either or thing, coach or GM. It's probably a lot of people. It's probably to clear out, everything and turn over. So that's where they're at. I mean, the good news for them is it's early and the league's all bunched up and they probably don't have to have an amazing year to make the playoffs. So that's what's working in their favor right now. But no, I mean, I don't think he's safe at all. I don't think he does have long-term job security. I think he's concerned. And I think a lot of people in the front office are concerned right now about what's going on.
Man, it's funny, though, because the one thing we were saying coming into this season in terms of, hey, the Leafs, if they're not going to be able to make the playoffs, what does it look like? And the biggest case for it was how much deeper the Eastern Conference is, right? And I guess to a certain extent that turned out to be true from the standpoint of more teams are above what they were a year ago in terms of the way we perceive them, right? Like the Bruins are better. Detroit is better. Some of the dregs of the league, essentially, teams that were out of it pretty early last year are in the mix heading into American Thanksgiving, which we all use as like a bar of looking for, what is it, like 80% of the playoff teams that are in a position by American Thanksgiving end up making it. So
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I think that there is a little bit of added urgency with the Leafs schedule this week. And yeah, that being a marker from the past. But yeah, that's basically their strongest case right now is something that's not within their control. It's the rest of the Eastern Conference being pretty watered down.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of teams that are very similar. I mean, the Flyers are there, the Islanders. It's kind of a great flattening around the league, but especially in the East, especially with what's happened. I mean, look at Washington's down at the bottom of the East. Tampa's down there. Florida's down there with the injuries that they've got. Who's the powerhouse in the East right now? Carolina? I mean, people are talking about Carolina and New Jersey as separating themselves from the pack. And I watched New Jersey last night and they play a terrible hockey game. And of course they don't have Jack Hughes, but I don't think they're scaring anybody. So You get on a win streak. I mean, if the Leafs win 6 in a row, which I know seems far-fetched right now, but if they win 6 in a row, they're in a way different position. They're probably leading the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And that's how tight it is. And I think part of what's going to happen is that after the trade deadline, whichever team goes 12-6 or 12-7 or whatever, that's going to be the one that gets in. And the one that doesn't go on a hot streak like that doesn't get in. And that's really what they're faced with, is it's going to be super thin on the margins. I was just looking at the projections we have at the Athletic right now. The Leafs are at a 38% chance to make the playoffs, which feels low, but it's low because of the way that they've played, and that impacts those projections. And there's a whole bunch of teams that are all bunched up in the same mix.
Well, that's sort of if you're trying to take the step back and do the standings watch thing and separating what you're seeing on the ice, they have one fewer win than the Florida Panthers, one fewer win than the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I would say, like, when you're saying who scares anybody, those two teams still get the benefit of the doubt from everyone, right? But they've got one more win. Like, that's it. They're not blowing anybody away. There hasn't been a gap that's made. So, yeah, Toronto's very much in it. I don't think the conversation is so much about what the wins and loss record is. Obviously, that impacts things. It's the process. That's why even last night, you know, I again, I do have some things that I liked from last night. I thought that they defended better. I think the Wool story, we didn't give enough credit to on Leafs Talk last night, just how sharp he's been and how desperately they needed that. And while they're trying to figure out their team defending, and while it's had, let's be honest, real gaps basically every single game, that how impactful that's going to be for them in terms of what they get from a points percentage. Like, they started that third period poorly. They finished that second period poorly, and Wool was the guy and ultimately ended up, I think, getting them those 2 points. Could have easily been an alternate reality where a lesser goaltender's in there like a Dennis Hildeby, and he lets in one or two of those shots. Leafs are staring down the barrel of down 4-2, and I don't think that they have the mustard to be able to come back in that game. So again, like, standings-wise, there is some optimism. It's just like you watch the product, and even yesterday, a shorthanded team, sure, it'd be one thing if they were shorthanded and looked like that, and you went, well, they're missing a ton of guys, and when they get healthy, they're going to be fine. The fact of the matter is like when they had those guys, they didn't look good either. That's what's sitting in people's guts. It's not the standings. It's the on-ice product.
I mean, if anything, they might look better with when they're missing players than they did early in the season when they had everybody. I mean, to the goaltending question, where do you think the Leafs are right now if they have league average goaltending all season?
Oh, I think
they're probably in a position where we're not talking the same way.
No.
They have 3 or 4 more points, and the conversation's way different than it is right now.
Yeah, and if they have 3 or 4 more points, that puts them tied in second place in the Atlantic with the Bruins.
Yeah.
Maybe even higher because maybe they get one of those games from the Bruins.
This is one of their strengths, and we would be talking about it. If they had Woll all season and he played like this, it would be a different conversation. So the crazy thing I think about the first 20 games this year is so many different things have gone wrong. You can't just pick one thing. You can't just say it's the defensive play, or how many players have had a good season so far this year? Yeah, John Tavares, Nick Robertson.
Yeah.
It's a super Ekman Larson, I would say, but it's a super short list, you know? So I think there's blame to go around on basically everyone on the roster, Tree Living, Berube, and it's hard. I don't think you can pick out one thing and say this is what happened, but goaltending is such a huge factor that Stolar's going from a .920 save percentage to .895 or whatever he's at now. That really hurts. And it really hurts when your team's making defensive mistakes and they're always going in the back of your net.
Okay, so to the goaltending question, we still haven't really gotten added clarity on the Stolar stuff, but do you get the sense that, like, again, they got to be a little bit of a desperate hockey team, right? But their move in the past was always to ride the hotter of the two goaltenders. There always seemed like there was a lean towards Joe Woll, that they wanted him to be the guy because they felt like the ceiling was higher. But that when Stolar's returns, given his play, that it's going to look like a more aggressive Joe Woll starting as the true number one goaltender and a Stolar's more traditional backup role, or we're too early to have that conversation?
I think it's way too early for that. What they're going to do is whoever's playing well is going to get more of the starts. You know, you're going to average a little more than 3 games every week, and which guy gets the 2 starts and which guy gets the 1 is going to depend on how they're playing. So, and the thing that we've seen in the past is that when Stolarz is playing less, he's better. So who's to say that he doesn't come back and play fewer games and look really, really good? So we're back to last year where it's a rotation, really. And I think we'll be debating even going into the playoffs who the starter is. I feel like these guys are close enough that if they get to the level that they should be at, That's not going anywhere. I don't think anyone's going to separate themselves and be the number one here.
I guess it's more the greater point of curiosity to me is like Wool looks really sharp. He looks fresh. And both these guys have their concerns when it comes to their ability to play the net a ton. And with this condensed schedule, like you mentioned, I don't imagine that Stolarz isn't going to get starts, right? They just signed him to an extension. They're probably going to lean into trying to let him rediscover his game. But I do think that they might be less patient than in years past. And it becomes a point where you go, is it out of those weeks where there's 4 games, which is very often right now, right? Like it feels like the Leafs are playing every second night with the condensed schedule. Do they ever end up pivoting to a scenario where it's 3-1? And does that 3 go to Joseph Wool? And do they trust him to do that? And I would argue that feels more likely than I would have guessed than at the beginning of the season.
I think they learned their lesson, though, that playing
Mhm.
Stolarz 12 of the first 15 was a mistake.
Mm.
Tree Living said yesterday that part of what happened with Stolarz is that he just played too much and we wore him down.
Yeah.
They should have mixed Hildeby in more early in the year, or God forbid played Primo more. They had to do something, because I think part of why his performance dipped is that he just can't do it. He can't play 80% of the games. And I don't know why you'd feel any different about Wool given his track record, the number of injuries that he's had, and missing training camp. I mean, they got to be really careful that even if he looks really, really good, not to lean on him too hard, because neither of these guys have shown they can be a 60 game a year guy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can we move to just like one that's I think a little bit more silly?
Sure, why not? It's your show.
Well, you're there at a lot of these games, and this is just one where fans brought it up, and so I think it's kind of worth discussing, because that's what I think the job of media is to listen to the fans and try to communicate that outwardly and try to get more answers to those questions. And yesterday it was pointed out that Matthews was not in the media box, and Armin, who is my producer, he messaged me, who does a lot of Maple Leaf games as well, said he's never seen Matthews at one of these games when he's been hurt. And that makes sense when he's in Germany and they're handling him a certain way from a year ago. But why would that be the case if he has a lower body injury? Like, why wouldn't he be with the team?
I haven't asked around on this one. I know some guys actually watch the games downstairs and aren't up in the press box. I've seen that before. I don't know, but so I'm just guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Either he is hurt enough that it's not comfortable for him to be there, he's watching the game somewhere else. But I understand why fans are saying that, because the look is, here's all the guys that are hurt all together watching the game, and where's the captain? So
Right.
I can do some digging around on that if this is gonna be kind of like the conspiracy.
I don't think it's a major concern, right? Like it's not even like I almost feel I was reluctant to even ask the question. And when McKee brought it up yesterday, I went like, I'm the same as you, where we don't have the details to it, and so it feels weird to discuss. But what I think it does illustrate is that people are uncertain when it comes to the leadership core of this team. That they wonder about the way that the top guys are going to pull the rope, and that something as fragile as a captain not being in a luxury suite, right, watching the game from the press box with the players, can incite a conversation about where he is. That doesn't happen if you're Taves, like that doesn't happen with that doesn't happen if it's McKinnon, I would say. But with Austin Matthews, it becomes a conversation. And I don't think that it's purely because it's Toronto and there's a ton of eyeballs. You get what I'm saying?
I mean, 2 years ago, Matthews was untouchable with the season that he had.
Mm-hmm.
He was the guy that wasn't taking hardly any criticism. He scored the 69 goals, win the Hart Trophy, win the Rocket again. And it feels like Marner's gone. He was a lightning rod that took a lot of the criticism and a lot of the attention. Nylander, I think, is what he is. And it just feels like a lot. And Tavares takes the contract that he does. Nyes is still a young guy finding his way in the league.
Yeah.
When the team's playing like this, there's going to be people that take heat. And Berube's gotten a lot of it. But I've seen more heat on Matthews this year than I think I've ever seen in was it his 10th season.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I just mean the fan base. You see it on social media. You see it in and it's different than last year, because last year the talk was, he's playing hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, that's not the conversation around it. So I don't really see that going anywhere until he looks more like Matthews of old, and we don't know yet if he can get there.
Mm. And I think that's basically it. Is people are really wondering, hey, will he will he ever feel like the dominant force that he was? Like I'm watching Macklin Celebrini last night, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
force, just an insane force. And I texted, like, McKee sent me one of the highlights of it, and I replied, remember when this was Matthews? Like, remember when it was early on in his career and he was just dominant, and every single night it was, hey, look at this highlight, look at this goal that he scored. And I don't buy into at all the idea or the notion that he was like a Mitch Marner creation, because he did things without Mitch Marner as well. And in fact, there were times where the two of them weren't together where I thought like Matthews' playmaking increased and that he looked like a more complete player not having Mitch on his line. This is not any piece of it to me. Like it's a zero. Do I think that having good players is better for you overall? Yeah, for sure. But do I think that Matthews' early career or the 2 years ago when he was untouchable was in any way like, oh, well, he had Marner as a safety blanket? No, I do not. But yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm going, which is what you touched on with the media box thing, is like normally that's a non-story, and that's a non-story here. That's not a, oh, well, you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, you guys bitch and moan about every single little tiny thing. I think that's pretty indicative of where the fan base is and how much pressure is going to be on him when he returns to, yeah, be kind of the guy that pulls them out of this.
It's interesting because, the first 6-7 years of his career, we were talking about where does he rank in the league, and the conversation was,
Him and McDavid.
Yeah, is he top 4? Is he top 3? Is he top 2? Can he push McDavid? And the way that he's playing right now, he's still obviously a very good player, and he's still, I think that you look statistically at where he ranks, and he's coming in as one of the elite players in the league still, but he's down around 25th, 30th. And that's just not the echelon that we've ever talked about Matthews before. And I think if the concern for the fan base and for the organization is this what he is now?
Mm-hmm.
Is he really not playing through anything? And is he just diminished? Or is it going to take him time to get back from whatever he played through all of last year?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Those are the real questions. And if he is that, JD, if he is, let's say he's the 28th best player in the league, how does the fan base react to that? And can the Leafs win with him being that?
Yeah, I don't know. I know what my gut says, but I'm going to give that one a little bit more time. You know what doesn't have time is, you mentioned how some of the young guys came up and gave them a little bit of a spark in the lineup yesterday. I thought Stetcher played well, and I'm not saying he's a young guy, but just like a replacement player that they had. Stetcher comes in, he plays well, and he looks like something different that they've had on their blue line. I think that Cowan probably had his most impactful game start to finish, where I went, oh, man, you really noticed him tonight. He still has some awkward young guy moments in a very difficult league, but ultimately he matched the pace and performed well. They called up Quillen, who only played 10 minutes, but had, I thought, a pretty impactful 10 minutes. Like, played better than most people would have drawn it up. Do you think that they're in a situation right now where guys like that are actually going to potentially take minutes and games from some of the guys that they brought in here who are making more money when the team gets healthy? That's on the table. The idea that we had before was the team's healthy, Cowan goes down, they want him to play in the AHL. Hey, Quillen, don't get excited about the numbers at the AHL. They're not really going to impact his ability to get on the roster. But that guys like Michelli, who was dreadful last night, that they're sort of in the eye of the storm. Like, I'm talking those kind of players, the Domies, the Michellis, the guys making money who have term here, that they could actually see stretches where they sit for AHL guys or 20-year-olds. Or Simon Benoit with Stetcher.
Yeah, I mean, he was bad. Yeah, he was bad last night too.
Yep.
So I think where Berube's at, that everything's on the table. I mean, you can just see in the usage with the players, and I know you guys have talked about it on Leafs Talk as well with Cowan. Berube's using him and playing him in minutes and putting him on power play 1 because he thinks he's one of his better players. And he's not wrong. And It's not about development for Berube. It's about fixing this, about taking the heat off the team and winning some hockey games. And you watched that game last night, and Quillen is better than 3 or 4 of the veterans that you've got dressed. Why is Yarncroc playing over 19 minutes? I mean, I didn't see anything from him. So I think it's going to depend.
He got power play 1 and PK 1, so he ended up getting kind of boosted there. But yeah,
I mean, it's a lot. It was a lot of Yarncroc last night, and when you're not playing St. Louis, it's not going to look. It's going to hurt you. Yeah. So It's going to depend, how many guys get healthy. If Nyes and Matthews and Lawton are all back, you can't keep all of the Marlies on the team. You're just going to hit up against the roster limit, and someone's going to have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing with a Quillen and a Cowan is you don't need waivers or anything. They're easy to move.
Mm-hmm.
Michelli's tougher. Are you going to put him on waivers? Because there's probably no coming back from that if you do.
Yeah, I would say at this point, what are you risking?
Yeah. I mean, you get 1.25 million in cap space like they did with Camp, and he can go to the Marlies, and maybe he wants to walk away from his contract too, and they can get out from under that number.
I like him on power play too. I think that he makes good passes when he's got the puck, which is pretty infrequent for this team. But if you're talking about what they're trying to do in terms of returning to an identity, he doesn't seem to fit the mold for me. And I haven't seen enough that would say you are guaranteed a roster spot. And yeah, it probably.
Did you see?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Did you see after the game with the belt handover that they had in Berube? And
I never watched that.
It was interesting. Well, they put it on social media, and Berube had a big speech about how they won and how Tavares drew the three guys in overtime and
which
made
was
the play.
Great moment of the game.
And Berube basically had this big speech about like that's how you win and that's what you need to do. And Michelli stands up and he's got the belt. And I was like, why does Michelli have the belt? When was he the player of the game? And it's because they haven't won so long. The last game that they won was against Utah. And Michelli had the goal and the assist against his former team. And he got the belt. So Michelli stands up, he's got the belt, and he said, I was going to give it to Willie, but after what the coach said, I'm giving it to Tavares. It was very funny. I mean, Berube's just been yelling at and giving it to these guys for weeks. And Michelli kind of read the tea leaves and read what the coach was saying and said, maybe I won't give the belt to Willie. It was for a guy that obviously doesn't have a lot of confidence on the ice and is fit in the organization. I think it was a window into just how he's fitting in here and trying to find his way in this environment and with this coach.
Yeah, and again, you don't really want to give up on skill and a skill set that you actually need on this team. Someone who, on paper, is supposed to be able to be useful, supposed to be a better player, certainly, than Quillen. But at some point, when you're talking about desperate roster decisions, those are the things that I think are going to come into focus when the team does get healthier, okay? And then speaking of which, the last thing, my personal read on Matthews is that they'll take their time with him. They want him to be 110%. That if anything we've learned over these last couple of years is that they are overly cautious with Matthews. And given that there's a little bit of a let up with the schedule where they only have one weekday game next week outside of like Friday, which I never count as the weekday. That's the weekend. The Friday's the weekend. They've only got the one game on Wednesday. It's a little bit of a lighter slate that they would say, let's skip the Wednesday game and let's bring him back for the weekend. The Nyes thing is far more curious, where he shows up for morning skate and then he's scratched and they say that it's a lingering issue with his lower body. Were you able to get any information on this?
Not yet, no, but it's been something he's been playing through. So, I mean, obviously not a great sign that he's not able to go, but I think it sheds some light on why maybe he hasn't been as effective as he was early in the year, the last 4 or 5 games. And I don't know what exactly it is, but it doesn't sound very serious. So I would suspect that he plays tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Well, James Mirtle of The Athletic. Again, you should read all of his work. It's great. This was, I think, a little less doom and gloom than when I did your pod.
I think after they win these games, it's just going to change the tone. And I wonder if a month from now, we're going to look back and we're going to laugh at the way some of what we were talking about the last couple of weeks, but maybe not. We'll see.
I hope so. I like there would be nothing greater than seeing people quote tweet me doing like Team Tank jokes or talking about the coaches being potentially fired or some of the players that are in the eye of the storm and have it be like, wow, this is classic Toronto media overreacting. And I'll go, that's fine. I can only react to what's in front of me. And what's in front of me right now is not great, like really bad. And like to the point that we were making earlier about the standings where you go like, oh, the standings are jumbled up. Like it's not very good. The Leafs have had this horrible schedule and they've still gotten to this point. Like they should have been able to take advantage of this. This should have been an advantage to them as a group that came back with some continuity and some guys that were excited to play for them. And instead it went completely the opposite direction. And so, yeah, I cover the team on a daily basis. I do a 2-hour show and a Leafs postgame show. Like nobody wants the Toronto Maple Leafs to not be a disaster more than me. I have way too much tied up in this. Anyway, we'll see you next week, buddy. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, JD.
You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple or on Spotify. It really helps the show. That's the number one thing that you can do if you are a supporter of this thing. I say it all the time, even if you listen live on other platforms. You catch all the extra little, maybe you missed something. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a thumbs up. If you're watching on Sportsnet Plus, thank you. Quick break. I want to talk about a couple of NBA teams that are catching my eye. That's next. I'm going to pay off the tease just because that's what you're supposed to do in this business. But I'm going to keep it real short because I forgot to address something with Mirtle. That was a big point of conversation for me yesterday on Leafs Talk that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. But I've said that I think the Raptors' ceiling is higher because there are not teams in the Eastern Conference that I view as all that great. And I still don't think that there's a great team that's in the NBA's East. I don't. Like the Cavs, they haven't been fully healthy. The Knicks, they're very good. But overall, when I'm watching the league every single night, I don't feel like there's a team that Toronto could not hang with in a 7-game series. And I will say this, plenty of season to go, still very, very early. And this team has benefited from a very weak schedule. But yesterday was a bit of a turning point moment for me with the Detroit Pistons. What is going on there is real. Do I think that necessarily they're going to finish first in the Eastern Conference when everything is said and done? I do not. But yesterday they played a back-to-back against the Atlanta Hawks. And if you saw the Hawks and you watched them against the Raptors, you'd think, oh, yeah, that team sucks. But they've actually been really good lately. And it was Detroit, second half of a back-to-back, kind of a bit of a schedule loss. And they went in there, and the score is way more close than the actual game was. Detroit handled them. And their roster right now, like the Cade Cunningham thing is becoming like, oh, okay, look out. This guy is probably going to be talked about as one of the league's best players over the next couple of years. You know, I've done predicting narratives recently. Like I said, Kendrick Perkins was going to start tweeting about the Raptors, and lo and behold, he just immediately did. Cade Cunningham, like, not face the league. That's stupid. But where does he sit amongst the game's best players is going to start to build more steam. And then this Jalen Duren thing is, whoo. That is the thing that feels like the real shifter for their group is he's nasty. That guy is a legitimate problem. Like, looks the part, plays the part. And they have a team identity. They're really enjoyable to watch. And yeah, if you got an extra night or you're able to flip around the channels like I do, I would recommend that they are really nice viewing when it comes to basketball. Okay, quickly, before I get to Jim Bowden, because I didn't want to lose too much time. Yesterday, McKee and I got in an argument about William Nylander. This is a guy who went 2 games without a shot and scored in overtime, which, like, I don't have any doubts as to William Nylander's skill. But I'm interested to see what the conversation becomes around him this year, because I think it's a little exhausting to just simply put it as everybody's afraid to talk about Nylander. And I'll just speak for myself personally. Like, I won't lump the media into this. But I do get the sense that, like, he is now becoming sort of the untouchable guy that you can criticize Matthews. You can criticize the coaching. You can criticize the GM. But God forbid you ever say anything about William Nylander's game, because he's just enigmatic. And that's just who he is. And as long as he's producing points, then who cares? But over this stretch, he has not played very well. This is 3 games in a row where he's not been very good. And his coach is picking on him and yelling at him on the bench because he's made a lot of mistakes. Look at the overtime goal that they gave up. It was a lot on him from the game, from the game before when they were in OT. It's like there's been a lot of mistakes, and it hasn't been as impactful as you would hope with Matthews out of the lineup. And my contention is that if you are one of the highest paid players in the league, I want to have more nights where it feels like you're playing David Pastrnak. That the team really feels you. That you're dominating. That you decide that you can put the team on your back. And I don't know why that's an uncomfortable situation or a conversation for some people. I think a lot of it has to do with he was criticized early and then turned out to be amazing bang for his buck, that he is extremely likable, that people don't have questions in terms of how it's weird because, like, the one guy that we all acknowledge is least impacted by any conversation about him is also the guy that fans seem to want no conversation about. And it's a certain section of fans. I get it that there's like the haters. I'm trying to find the middle here. But yeah, to me, if you're saying, hey, who do you need more from over the stretch while you're missing guys? I would say the guy that's playing who makes the most money. And that simply dismissing all of the play as, well, he gets a goal. It feels reductive to me. So over the next few games, I'm very, very curious, more so than any other player on this team, more than Dakota Joshua, more than Max Domi, more than Easton Cowan, more than Joe Wool. I'm mostly curious to see how Nylander plays. Quick break. We'll come back and talk to Jim Bowden. GM for 16 seasons, an executive of the year, now insider and analyst. You can see him on CBS, hear him on SiriusXM, and read him at The Athletic, which, yeah, I do nonstop. It's Jim Bowden. Hey, man, thanks for making time.
Hey, JD, thanks for having me back on your show.
Yeah, it's always great to be able to pick your brain, dude. I really do. I love these segments. I really look forward to them, and yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a couple of weeks. So I have been reading you at The Athletic. I have been watching you at CBS, and you've been talking a lot about the Toronto Blue Jays. And so I do want to start with this. You've been very tied in with these guys. I think that you have made a lot of like really sharp observations about them in the past. And one of the biggest points of conversation, I think, is kind of the jumping off point for all of this is like, are they going to act differently than they have in years past because of the World Series? Because there have been basically two sides of the ledger. One is you make a World Series and it proves that your process is correct, and so you double down on that. Or you make a World Series, you get a huge cash injection from that run, you've got a fan base that is rabid, and you want to try and get a little bit more aggressive and potentially go outside of your valuations. And based on your early reads, and again, I know that we're still in mid-November or late November, depending on how you want to put it, what is your initial assessment of which one of those two paths the Blue Jays are more likely to go down?
Pedal to the metal. Yeah, they're ready. Checkbook is out. Pen is ready to write. Yeah, look, they were an inch away from a world championship. 1 inch. When you get that close, you want to finish it. And the one thing that you know in baseball is when you represent the American League, everyone else is going to come try to get you. Everyone else is going to do what they can to catch up to you, and you know how tough it is. And so as great a season as the Blue Jays have, running it back won't get you back to the World Series. You have to be aggressive. You have to get better, and you know you're that close. And so, yeah, I'm expecting a splash. And the splash isn't just bringing back Bo Bichette. The splash will be either Kyle Tucker, or it'll be Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease, or it'll be Edwin Diaz or Robert Suarez. So I'm expecting that Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins will have the wherewithal to make a couple of moves to be difference makers. This is a really good team. They proved it last year, but you got to keep getting better.
So essentially, you would be surprised if they didn't end up with one of the like top 6 difference makers on the market.
Absolutely, I'll be surprised. 100%.
Yeah.
They're ready. They're ready to go. They understand it. They understand where they are and where they can go. I mean, when you're that close, you want to finish it. You want to bring the World Championship not just to Toronto, but obviously to the country of Canada. So close, yet so far, right? I mean, all I can do is think about the cleat of Will Smith. All I can think about is the ball lodged at the bottom of the wall. All I can think about is Andy Paz over KK Hernandez for that catch. I mean, those are nightmares, right? If you're a Toronto fan, you were that close. So let's improve the team enough that it's not as close.
Yeah, Jim. I think about those things a lot. I was at all those games as a fan, and I can tell you that I'll just be, vacuuming. I'll be reading a book. I'll be trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, one of those invasive thoughts will pop into my head, and I'm like, oh, it makes me sick. Like, I think that.
The one that makes me the sickest though of all of them is the Will Smith play at the plate.
Of course.
And you know what makes it even worse for me is listening to him on Jimmy Kimmel. When he went on the Jimmy Kimmel show and he says, I keep looking and hoping that somebody can't even now go back and reverse it when I look at the video. that just keeps ringing in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it was that close, right? I don't know if the cleat was touching the plate. I don't think Will Smith knows if his cleat was touching the plate.
Mm.
And that's the difference with one team winning the World Series and one team not. And so, tough way to end it. We all get it. But you know what? What an exciting year for the Blue Jays and the fans. And to be able to build a lineup with that much contact and that much power, and having a lineup 1-9 where there really weren't any holes. Like when you face the Dodgers, you get to the bottom of the lineup. Oh, I can pitch around this guy, or I can get this guy out. You go to the Toronto lineup, it's like everyone's got to put the ball in play.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got a chance to hit the ball at the ballpark. So it was a really fun team. But the one thing we learn about baseball, you bring back the same team, you won't be as good.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it works. You have to every year make it better. You have to improve it. It's not about just running it back. Mark Shapiro knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, he and Ross should have shared the Executive of the Year award as well. When you take a last place team and put them in the World Series in this day and age, especially in the American League East, they should have won that award. You know that, and I know that.
Yeah, and I thought that the manager should have won Manager of the Year as well. Like, same thing.
Me too.
If you're looking at it just from an expectation standpoint, most people prognosticating the Blue Jays coming into the season had them dead last in their division. And if that was the way that you were perceiving them coming into it, then I don't know what the argument would have been against those guys collecting those awards. Okay, but I'm excited by your answer.
Well, let me jump on that for a minute, because
Sure.
I think we have to remind our listeners that the Manager of the Year award has always been a joke, because there's not a media member that really knows what a manager's doing behind the scenes. They don't know the motivation, the discipline. They don't know the strategy. They don't know the analytics. They don't know what the front office is forcing. They don't know how they delegate authority to the coaches. They don't know how they handle some of the fires that never become public. There's a lot. And the one thing I learned, there was a GM, you can evaluate managers when you're a GM and you're living with the guy. The media can't. And so what it's become is a popularity contest. And really, really nice guys that are really nice to all the media members are going to win. Stephen Vogt is going to win. Matt Arnold's going to win because they're so great to everybody. And so it becomes a popularity contest, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
So that award drives me crazy, JD. So I just wanted to get that out there.
No, I'm totally with you. One voter in this market explained her answer as to why she didn't vote for John Schneider. And the answer was, I didn't feel as though he impacted the winning. And I went, how would you know that? Like, I just,
right.
Like to draw that conclusion feels
you
so,
can't.
Well, yeah, you're just so obviously showing your hand that you did this out of nothing but spite. Like that's it. It's like you purely voted based on emotion, because the reasoning that you gave is not based in anything that you could have actually assessed personally. So it drove me nuts. Anyway, your answer about the Jays breaking out the checkbook and moving in that direction excites me, because I agree with the things that you're saying. And to your point about Shapiro knows this, he said as much at his media availability at the end of the season. And it sort of went a little unnoticed, but because those two guys are not the greatest speakers on the baseball team. They're very cryptic, and they don't like to give out a lot of information. They do not love sound bites. And when you contrast them against, say, some of the other general managers that this market has had in recent history, it's a very stark contrast. But he did mention exactly what you said, that you can't look at this team and expect to run it back and have the same results, that you've got to try to augment it in certain areas. But the initial return that I've seen from people is that they believe the Blue Jays are hyper-fixated on starting pitching more so than anything. And I'm curious if that is your read as well. Because like you mentioned a bunch of names there, and all impact guys. And I think that that's what a smart front office does is, hey, who are the best players that can help our team, rather than just focusing in on one area. But if you had to make a prediction as of today, like where they would add that area of impact, would it be to starting pitching, or would it be somewhere else?
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is what I've heard, okay? And I'm not one that likes to guess. So what I've heard through the industry is they'd like to bring Bo Bichette back, that they have been engaged in Kyle Tucker, at least initial conversations. They would like to add a starting pitcher, and I've heard Framber Valdez and Dylan Cease, and they'd like to have more depth in the bullpen. That's what I've heard. So those are the four things that I've heard. It's not coming from Mark or Ross. It's coming from opposing GMs or agents, but that's what I've heard.
That's a lot of big names. Okay, so you said they want to bring Bo Bichette back, and this remains to me one of the biggest points of curiosity in terms of how things have started. Is
sure
for for Kyle Tucker, and I think I was watching you on a clip. It was either Foul Territory or with CBS, and you were discussing how some executives reached out to you and been like, they don't really have the number for Kyle Tucker, right? That, hey, maybe it's a short-term deal with a higher AAV and maybe it's a bigger contract. But initially, he felt like a lock for $400 million at the beginning of the season, especially when Vladdy got his deal. But now there seems to be some uncertainty around that. What we do know, though, like from you and you saying these things, is like Kyle Tucker's going to get paid and that he's going to be at the very top of the market. Bo has remained somewhat less clear. Like, it doesn't seem to be established yet. And again, November, understanding that. But whether or not teams are really looking at him as a shortstop, how many teams would really be in his market, why the Blue Jays were not more aggressive in trying to re-sign him from the outset, and why their approach is this one where they're like, nope, go to market and then kind of come back to us. It would make a little bit more sense to me if, you know, what you're saying right now turns out to be like, okay, they really hyper-focused on Kyle Tucker, and they'll circle back kind of on Bo Bichette knowing they feel more comfortable being able to sign him. But what are you hearing about Bo Bichette's market today in terms of what the money, what the term looks like, and even the position?
Most GMs view Kyle Tucker 1 and Bo Bichette 2.
Yeah.
Even ahead of Schwarber and Alonso and the other free agents that are out there because of the 27-year-old age. The value that Bo Bichette has and the reason so many teams have interest is because some teams view him as a second baseman or a third baseman. So the positional kind of view is there. He'd also fit in Atlanta at shortstop. I'm just not sure Alex is going to spend the money for that. I think he'd rather do Ha-Seong Kim. But, you know, when you look at the teams that need a second baseman and third baseman, that's endless. And he's at the right age, and he's led the league in hits twice. He's a great makeup guy, great character guy, winning player. So if the need checks out, he's going to get paid. He's going to get the long-term deal. He's going to do really well in free agency. You know, I think if you're Toronto and you bring him back, you put him at second and leave him in as a shortstop and just go ahead and make that move at the time that you sign him. I think it's time to do that. But I love the player. I love the person as well. So I do think Toronto wants to bring him back, and I do think he wants to stay there. I get that strong impression that that's really important to him. So I think if everything is equal, I think there's a really good chance he returns because of that.
Yeah,
I don't think getting one means you won't get Tucker either. You know, you have Springer coming off at some point, right? He doesn't have long terms. You can backload Tucker and just be giving Springer money plus a little more to get Tucker. So it can fit. The money's there to fit because of the way they've structured the roster.
That's really interesting because, like, first of all, we've gone from a world where it was basically, hey, you're not going to have Vladdy and Bo. And that was the build up to these guys. I'm saying, like, through their rookie deals, that one of these two guys will get paid. It probably won't be both of them. And now the scenario you're outlining is that, you know, contrary to, other people's beliefs, that the Jays could actually be in on Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker, and that signing one does not exclude them from signing the other.
Right, but I think it's unrealistic to think you're going to get both. But if you get one or the other, you've done well, right? I think that's how you have to look at it. I'm not intimating that I think they're going to get both of them, but I am intimating I think they'll get one of the two.
Yeah, man. God, that would the level of excitement here for just either of them coming back would be huge. And to your point about Bo Bichette, like I've made this before, but you don't want to put too much into things like the intangibles. But one thing that really does seem to work for them is that they've got this this personality in Vladimir Guerrero Jr., right? Which is like he makes things easy, and guys really seem to like him and gravitate towards him. But then you counter him with a guy like Bo Bichette, who's hyper intense and who cares about every little detail. Like I've described him before, he's a tennis player. Like, he's an individual player who tries to get the most out of himself. And having those two guys kind of at your core in terms of what you represent as a team, I think that there is a little bit of added something in terms of the way that they move forward from a group dynamic standpoint. And I'm curious from your standpoint, again, a guy who won Executive of the Year, a guy who spent 16 seasons in the chair, how much stock you should put into something like that, like your makeup of the group and the way that stars fit with each other personality-wise.
Yeah, well, you didn't finish in first in the East or get to the World Series and be an inch from the World Championship without that being a major factor. I mean, the one thing we all loved about the Blue Jays, they were the best defensive team in the American League, and they had a lineup that made contact top to bottom with power, which is really hard to do. And then to top it off, when you're around this team, it is a humble group, it is a team group, and it's makeup off the charts. And Mark Shapiro has won executive of the year twice in his career. And you look at the moves, how did he get Barzum? You go up and down the roster, you guys have seen it. But he really, in the Toronto Blue Jays and Cleveland organizations, really emphasizes human beings at every level. He pays a lot of attention to who are you as a person. And you saw that on the field with Toronto. And Toronto, look, the talent was great, don't get me wrong. But it's the intangibles and the human beings that got you as far as you went. That's not going to change. And that's why Bo Bichette is so important. Kyle Tucker's not that, by the way. He's not a face of the franchise. You know, if you were to get both, it would be Guerrero, Bichette, and then Tucker, even though Tucker is a complete player, right? 30 homers, 30 steals, got the hit tool, plus defender, plus thrower, plus runner, true 5 tools. But he's not the face of the franchise. He's not the guy that's going to, you know, be a difference maker makeup-wise. He's just going to fit in perfectly on whatever team he goes to, as long as he's not the headliner.
Yeah. But when we're talking about personality, guys, this isn't just the Bo Bichette conversation. This is like overall the trickiness of having a roster where, like you said, you're not trying to just run it back. You got to augment it in spots, but you also have to be careful not to lose the personalities that got you there. And that brings me to the Chris Bassett conversation, and I guess Max Scherzer too, because the initial read seems to be that there won't be room for Max Scherzer on this roster, but that they would try to work something out with Chris Bassett, but if it is a hybrid role. And your early read on the likelihood that Chris Bassett returns as a Blue Jay and his market as a starting pitcher, and whether or not teams are going to look at him and say, like, yeah, no, this is going to be a guy that eats 160 innings for us, or if it's going to be something that they look at him through the lens of what he proved in the World Series last year, or like the playoffs, which is, yeah, you can get starts from him. He's a swing man, but ultimately his value come playoff time is going to be out of the bullpen.
You have to get younger, and that's how you keep winning. So, look, I love Bassett. I love Scherzer. I love what they brought to the table. Let's go get Dylan Cease. Let's go get Framber Valdez, right? I mean, that's kind of how I view it. You always want to try to upgrade. You always want to try to get better. You always want to try to get younger. You always want to extend your window of winning. Bringing back the same guys, you know, Scherzer's a high-risk injury guy. How many starts is he going to make? You know, unless you want to do what the Dodgers do, which is, okay, I'm fine with 10 starts in the regular season and we'll save it for October. You know, and it just doesn't make sense. Bassett's another year older. Let's get younger now. Let's get a younger arm that's going to bounce back a little bit better. So I think those are the two kind of players that you do move on from, and you upgrade by younger pitchers, whether that's via trade or whether that's via free agency.
So I'm not trying to get you to repeat yourself, because I know you did say that they're going to be in on making a splash. But the part of the roster that would be the most difficult to see that in would be relief pitching based on their previous behavior. Like Jeff Hoffman just got the biggest contract that they've ever handed out a reliever. It was pretty far outside of what they've normally done with that area. But like if you're looking at, things that they could obviously improve, it would be their closer. And so, maybe Edwin Diaz gets his $100 million and it prices him outside of the Toronto Blue Jays. But how deep do you view the start or the top of the relief market and the level of aggression Toronto will have, not just to like add one of those guys, but supplant Jeff Hoffman from that role?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competition out there for those guys, so it's not going to be easy. You know, when you're especially when you have the Dodgers and the Mets and some of these bigger market clubs that need to do something, and there's only so many to go around, right? We have Edwin Diaz and Suarez at the top. They're going to get 80 to 90 million. Maybe they get 100, but they're going to get 80 to 90. And then you got the next group. You got the Peter Fairbankses. You know, you've got the Rafael Iglesias. That's kind of the next level guy. So it's going to be a very competitive market. And you know, I think a lot of times, I think if you can't get the very top guys like Diaz and Suarez, a lot of times I think you're better off solving the bullpen through trades with younger arms. Go chase guys that are right now setup guys that can become high leverage guys, or guys in the minor leagues that have big arms. You know, when you spend all the money on relievers, it's really tough. Only Rivera and Hoffman, Edwin Diaz is an exception, have a long history without getting those injuries, right? People get hurt. I mean, look at the Dodgers last year. Where's Tanner Scott? Where's Kirby Yates? Where's Michael Kopech? Where was Evan Phillips? Nowhere to be found in the playoffs or World Series. Nowhere to be found. They did a great job at last offseason building up the bullpen. None of them were around in October. So you got to be careful. I'd rather spend my money on the starting pitcher. I'd rather spend my money on the right fielder. I'd rather spend my money on Bo Bichette. And so I think with the reliever, if I can get Diaz, that's one thing. But otherwise, I think you concentrate in the other areas and then keep going and looking for arms. You can build relievers. I built three guys that won the Rolaids Relief Award back in the day, trading for Jeff Shaw, who was a fourth reliever for Montreal, or trading for Danny Graves, trading for Jeff Brantley. I mean, these guys did great stuff. They became impact closers. You can go find them, and you got a better chance of succeeding and keeping them healthy if you go get the guys that don't have the innings on the odometer, the pitching arm already.
So you made it clear they're going to be aggressive in free agency and with the checkbook. Do you expect them to also be aggressive in exploring the trade market or augmenting their team through trades?
They feel it. They're just like the fans in Canada and Toronto. They feel it. They know how close they are. They're going to do everything they can to get to that next step. So they want to get back there in 2026, not 27 or 28. They want to get back right here, right now.
So what's your read into the amount of guys that are opting in to one-year deals?
I think, first of all, the qualifying offer, people don't want to give up draft picks for guys like Trent Grisham and Gleyber Torres, right? And if you're a pitcher like Woodruff and Imanaga, I don't want a new team to see my medicals, so I better take the 1 year $22 million, because if I go on the market and they see my medicals, they're going to give me a low base with incentives. And I think in the case of Gleyber Torres and Grisham, the team's miscalculated. I mean, think about this. Trent Grisham's going to make more money in 2026 than Josh Naylor will in any year of the next 5 years with his deal with Seattle.
Yeah.
I'm not offering him the qualifying offer. Bye. Mm-hmm. He's not a $22 million player. But I think players are making smart decisions. You know, if I were Gleyber Torres or Grisham or Woodruff or Imanaga, given their situations, I too would have opted in and taken the qualifying offer. That's a lot of money for 1 year.
Yeah. Do you think that the Yankees wanted Grisham back?
I didn't understand when they made the offer because I knew he would take it. And they were telling people behind the scenes that they thought that he would reject it and get a multi-year deal somewhere. That's what they thought. They just miscalculated, in my opinion.
Well, just the reason why I'm asking about him in terms of like Blue Jays stuff is that, they're one of their direct competitors, you would imagine, when it comes to a lot of the splash players that you're talking about. Like they're one of the teams that's rumored to be in Kyle Tucker's conversation. They're one of the teams that wants to augment their starting pitching and their bullpen. And do you think that is going to, like him opting into that deal, changes what they're going to be able to do financially in the free agent market?
Yeah, it does. It takes $22 million off the books that they could have spent. That's $22 million they could have put towards Bellinger, $22 million they could have put towards Tucker or anybody else, or Edwin Diaz for that matter. If I'm a Blue Jay fan, I'm excited that Grisham accepted it, because that absolutely will take $22 million away from what they're able to do.
Yeah, a couple more for you. You've been generous with the time. We always talk about free agency with dominoes. What in your estimation is the first domino that needs to fall in order for things to start moving?
You know, it's always tough when Scott Boras has 10 of the top free agents. Yeah. Because he controls the board. And so over the last 15 years, the one thing we learned about Scott Boras, he's going to sign the first guy that gets an offer over his expectations and over the market. That guy will go first. That's from his perspective. He's got 10 of the top free agents. There's also some agents out there like Aces, Sam and Seth Levinson that will look at the market and read it pretty quickly. And if they're scared that the market might go flat, they could pull the trigger and do one of the deals with one of their players first. So when you look at the Joe Longo, when he did the Aaron Nola deal, he looked at that market and said, "Oh boy, I better do this Nola deal because I think this market's going flat." And he went and got that unbelievable deal from the Phillies. So, the agents look at it, that way. Clubs really don't determine timing. The good part for Seattle and Josh Naylor, which was the first one to go, was simple. There wasn't a market for Naylor, right? There were three teams that needed a first baseman: Seattle, Boston, and the Mets. And Boston came out publicly and said they want a right-hand hitter. So that took Naylor out. So your only hope is the Mets, and they're putting emphasis on run prevention, which Naylor doesn't really fit. And a lot of people think Alonso could still go back there. And so Naylor was like, okay, I'm getting a 5-year deal at $92.5 million. I don't have any other options out there. I better grab it. And Seattle was smart because when the offseason started, Jerry Dipoto came out right away and said, our priority is Josh Naylor.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say first base or third base. He said Josh Naylor. Mm-hmm. And so he did it right and got a deal that was really a little bit below market, to be honest. He did a good deal, and Naylor got his team. So, again, unique circumstances around Naylor, right? Not a lot of demand for first base, and a team that had just been to the playoffs, and a player that wanted to stay, and it got done.
So when we're talking about dominoes, and we're also talking about teams with budgets, like with the qualifying offer and the Yankee stuff, I've been reading you at The Athletic, and I think in your most recent piece, maybe you have something since then, but when you wrote on Tarek Skubal, it was they are going to make a move when somebody blows them away. They're going to have to. He will be traded. If you're a team trading for Tarek Skubal, the belief, I would think, has to be that you're not just trading for him, you're re-signing him. Like, he's not a rental player for you. So how?
Well, let me kind of go through that real quick, and I have another article going out on Skubal later this week. But let's be clear. I think if I'm Detroit, I'm going to make an offer of $350 million and see what Scott Boras says. I need to make sure Skubal knows I respect him and make an offer more than Yoshinobu Yamamoto got from the Dodgers, which was $325 million. If I offer $350 and he comes back at $500, then I know where I have to go and probably need to trade him. I also need to know what Chris Ilitch wants to do. If you're Scott Harris, the president of the Tigers, you need to ask your owner, how far are you willing to go? It's going to probably take $400 million is what I would tell him. Will you commit $400 million, $40 million a year for 10 years for Skubal and get that answer? If he says no, then I have to trade him. I can't wait to the trade deadline and get 2 months value out of him. And I might be contending, and then I'm not going to trade him. And then what am I going to get? A fourth-round pick? Like, I'm not going to do what the Angels did with Ohtani and set my organization back 7 years. So my whole point is sign him now or make an offer where you think you can sign him. Otherwise, I think you have to trade him. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. You can trade him to a team who's willing to give him the $400 million and get a full return. Or if I'm a team, I'm going to try to trade for him as a one-year rental, like the Yankees did with Juan Soto, knowing I would have to give up a lot less if it's a one-year rental.
Okay, so when you're looking at the market, though, for him, that's what makes it so fascinating is, like, if you're looking at him as a one-year rental, it doesn't impact the books the same way. But if you're looking at him and saying, no, we're going to offer him the $400 million, I can't imagine there's that many teams that would be doing that, which kind of limits.
Handful.
Yeah, who are those teams that would be willing to give him that kind of money? Because that's kind of important in terms of the Tigers' framework of what they're looking at getting in return. Red Sox,
Yankees, Dodgers, Mets. That's four.
Yeah.
I'd probably come up with a fifth one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's enough.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's enough. Yeah. And then you'll say, well, why would the Dodgers do that? Well, they'll trade Glasnow in the deal and just upgrade their ace instead of adding an ace. He doesn't have a no-trade clause, right? If you're the Mets, I'll give up my two top pitching prospects. I have an owner that's going to pay him $500 million. I don't have a problem with that. So, yeah, it's out there. You know, Brian Cashman would make a run. I'm not sure he has enough, but he'd make a run. Toronto doesn't have enough, so you're not going to get him. The Red Sox have enough if they want to get him. They can do it like they did Crochet and get him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see. I hope the Tigers sign him. I think it'd be better for baseball if they get to keep him, and I hope Chris Ilitch will pay him like his dad would have.
Well, yeah, I don't want to see him end up on the Dodgers or the Yankees. So, right. I hope that he stays with the Tigers too. And that brings me to my last one, which is I've been kind of floating out this idea that the narrative is starting to turn a little bit on the Dodgers in terms of, hey, is this unfair? I don't want a salary cap. I don't like salary caps. I'm not interested in it whatsoever. And especially now with the Blue Jays breaking out the checkbook the way that they do, I don't know how you could be someone in this market and want that. But I am curious, like, what their level of spending does look like this offseason. If they do nail down a guy like a Kyle Tucker, how much that changes the narrative. But also, the World Series numbers were so big. Baseball has this incredible amount of momentum. Where are you at right now in terms of the winds in which they're blowing for the belief that the CBA gets sorted and we avoid a lockout?
All right. So first of all, the Dodgers have $80 million coming off their books this winter. They have plenty of money to spend,
Yeah.
and they're going to go pedal to the metal as well. Why? Because they want to do all the deals they can in case the CBA a year from now limits what they can do in the future. Because whatever they do now has to be grandfathered in. So if that means they can go out there and make some big moves, I think they will. Edwin Diaz, play on Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette. I think they absolutely will play on the big boys. In terms of the CBA, I know what the commissioner and the teams want. They want a salary cap, but I also know the teams understand they can't lock out the fans. So I think we hear this every single time. Oh, there's going to be a work stoppage in the end. Baseball's not going to shut down. And by the way, they haven't shut down since Rob Manfred became commissioner, and I think he understands what a great shape the game is in. I don't see a salary cap down the road, but I think there will be additional ways of limiting what you can spend at the top. I think we'll continue to see improvement in that area.
Again, spent 16 seasons as an MLB executive. He won Executive of the Year. He's now an insider and analyst that you can see on CBS, here on SiriusXM, and read at The Athletic. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Jim, for making time.
Thanks, JD. Appreciate having me on.
Yeah, take care. One of the best. One of my favorite guests. Okay, so a couple quick reactions off that. One, just about the CBA stuff. I can't remember having conversations about baseball like this as frequently as I've had. And yeah, of course, the Blue Jays made a World Series, but it feels bigger than that. It feels more than just, okay, the team is hot and the market is hot for baseball, that there's real momentum around the sport. We've had back-to-back World Series that were unbelievably exciting. And you just look at the numbers and the way people are engaged with this sport versus the way that I feel with a couple of the other leagues. Like, I don't think that the NBA has a ton of momentum right now. I think that there are a lot of big questions that league needs to sort out. I don't feel as though hockey is trending in an incredible direction. I think even the NFL is having some awkward conversations. Baseball is the one sport where, from my vantage point, it seems like most people are pretty happy. And that the anger for lower spending teams is directed in the right place, which is just cheap owners. That Pirates fans, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know enough of them, but that they're not looking at this and saying, oh, if we had a salary cap, we would be great. They're saying if we had an owner who cared and who wanted to invest money, that would help us out. And I have a conspiracy theory about this that I'm going to share tomorrow with Ennis. They can't lock the players out. I don't want a salary cap. It's interesting to hear Jim say that there will be some forms of mechanisms that might limit teams, and I'm okay with some form of a happy medium. I'm okay with the idea that they're limiting deferred money to allow teams like Dodgers to circumvent the cap. I'm okay with some form of a minor hybrid that doesn't ultimately impact the spirit of the sport, and certainly doesn't impact the games. 2, Jim is as plugged in as anybody. But when he's talking about these guys getting aggressive and that they feel this, that's one of the most encouraging moments you can probably have as a Blue Jays fan looking at this offseason. And to me, that is now the way that I'm going to set my it was already, okay? To be honest, like, I started the show by saying you can't miss on Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette. That one of those two guys has to be a Toronto Blue Jay. Otherwise, to me, it's a disaster. I don't care how the nerds spin it to me about WAR and, oh, if they got Polanco and this other player and how it actually supplements this. And you got to have one of those two. And frankly, as much as I understand their desire to upgrade the pitching and to be in the Framber Valdez conversations and to be in the Dylan Cease conversations, I'm much more okay with the idea of getting a really good but not top of the pile starting pitcher versus one of those two bats. Yeah, they hit, they raked, they were red hot. They're going to have Santander next year, hopefully give you better production than you had a year ago. But if I'm looking at the Jays bats realistically, just the way that they hit, and I'm trying to say you can't run it back and expect the same results, that would be the area that I feel most strongly about. I'm not sure you're going to get that season from Nathan Lucas or that season from George Springer, that run from Ernie Clement again. Like, I'm sure that Bo Bichette is going to hit. I'm sure that Kyle Tucker is going to hit. I'm sure that those two guys fit into your lineup and make you feel deep and make you feel like a real threat no matter what. So all these other things that feel way more question marky, yeah, I would love it if the Jays got a closer that wasn't Jeff Hoffman. I would. I think that's not even just an emotional take because of the home run he gave up in the ninth, which I was pissed off about in the moment, and I talked to Ennis about. I really believe that they could do better at closer than Jeff Hoffman based on the results that we saw this season and all the home runs that he gave up at the Rogers Center. But is it a priority to me in the same way? No. Like, if they end up with a seventh inning guy, I'll be okay. And the idea that that's somewhere they can upgrade throughout the regular season, they can see what they have, like, everyone's going to live with that just fine. They obviously need to add a starter. I don't think that it can just be you're bringing back Chris Bassett and you're rolling with Eric Lauer and hoping that Bowden Francis returns to form. Like, that isn't it for me. I get it. They got to add one of those guys. But to me, it's about those two guys at the very top of the pile, Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette. And not only what they represent to winning, which I think is very clear, but satiating a fan base that is starving and has nothing but positive things to say about this team top down. That you keep that momentum rolling, that you keep that vibe in the city with either bringing Bo Bichette back or signing Kyle Tucker. One of those two things. Anyway, that was fun. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll do what we missed. All right, final block. And Armin is here.
We got to update your artist list soon. Can we just do like all like
No.
90s old school hip hop? Is that all?
Yeah,
part
well,
of
I
it?
already have a lot of that on my list. Like, I provide you guys with the list.
Yeah.
I like how you say update the artist list.
It has not been updated in a little bit.
First of all, I actually did update it recently, and so shows that you guys don't pay attention because you're on a shared notes app. So not doing your job. That's fine. No. Out yourself more. Tell the people more about how you're not paying attention. I'm just going to look at this quickly. There are at least 50 names on my list of artists for the JDP show.
Folks, some of these artists, you legit can't even find them on YouTube. Like, I would need like a gold member Spotify subscription to even see these artists.
Okay, all right, yeah. That's such a lie. That's such a lie.
You can't even get them clean too. Like the clean version.
The clean version is the part. I've had moments like this where I send you guys where I'm like, okay, I want this song today because I'm listening to it. And then I go, man, it's going to sap the whole song because it'll take too much to edit the lyrics. Yeah, it's not easy asking you guys for more Griselda. And yeah, it's just not, it's not it. Anyways, what we miss?
Let's start with LeBron.
Refresh this.
LeBron James.
Yeah.
Made the return to the court. The king is back.
You were so sad you had to watch the Leafs and not that.
You know what? Willie's goal made it a little worth it. But, like, yeah, I texted you guys. I'm like, if I see a Colton Parayko game winner right now and I'm missing LeBron's return, it's going to hurt. But aside from his actual return, LeBron was on, had the greatest shooter of all time, Steph Curry, on Mind the Game pod.
Oh, you got to hear it.
They were
He's a must listen.
They were chatting. And they brought up the 2028 Olympics, which happens to be in Los Angeles.
Who did he replace? JJ Redick? Or no, it's Steve
Nash.
Nash. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Stevie's there. So LeBron and Curry were talking about 2028 Olympics a bit. And LeBron officially took his name out the hat, which for LeBron is kind of rare to do because he likes people speculating about what he's going to do next. So for him to say, I'll be watching from Cabo was kind of a big deal. Curry didn't fully rule himself out. But he said, I highly doubt, I'll be playing in the 28 Olympics. Just kind of obvious. None of these things are surprising. These guys are old.
Yeah, this isn't news. LeBron's 40 years old, man. He's going to be 41 next month.
Are you not surprised at all, though?
No.
No part of you.
What do you mean? He's 41 years old. Why would I be surprised that 2 years from now, he's, as a 43-year-old man, not going to be lacing him up to go to the Olympics? What are we talking about here?
Because I thought it would be a little too picture perfect for an Instagram post from King James to say
This is how your generation looks at things.
No, because
like,
LeBron,
what makes a
Bunk,
good Instagram
Bunk,
post?
LeBron, he cares about the legacy things. So
That's legacy.
So
LeBron 2028 beating
retiring
Serbia.
from the Lakers,
Yeah.
and then playing in the Olympics in LA, and then getting that final chalk toss. And just that moment, I know he wanted that, but so that's why I was a bit surprised. I like the take of him waiting till 28 to retire and then doing the Olympics thing and calling it quits. What do you think? You're out? You never saw that coming?
Again, I don't frame my life through what someone's last Instagram post is going to be like as a player, and I think LeBron's legacy is set, and that Olympics in LA have zero bearing on LeBron and zero bearing on Steph Curry, zero bearing on Kevin Durant. The thing that I find interesting about this is what I was talking to you about before the show yesterday, which is like we're moving. It's a realization. This happened with quarterbacks in my lifetime already, and it's happened in the NHL, but it hasn't really happened in the NBA, where the guys that I have like spent my entire my prime watching, my illustrious athletic prime, they age out. Like there was a golden generation of quarterbacks in the NFL, right? We had Eli Manning and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers. And all of a sudden the quarterbacks that we just knew that we cared about, Drew Brees, all these guys were just gone overnight. They all disappeared essentially at the same time. It wasn't staggered. They were all together, and all of a sudden it was a pivot to the new league. And the quarterbacks were clear and obvious, the next group. Lamar, Patrick Mahomes was winning. Patrick Mahomes lined up to have a Super Bowl against Tom Brady. And that was awesome, right? Like that was really, really cool. And it's going to be one of the huge markers for Tom Brady in the greatest of all time debate, which is like he beat Mahomes in a Super Bowl. So who cares where they were at the time? Who cares how good the defense was? Like that happened. If you're ever going to debate the GOAT stuff, you got the crossover of these two players. Amazing. So they handed off the quote-unquote golden generation of my lifetime of quarterbacks to a new golden generation of quarterbacks, and with young, exciting guys that you could see taking over the reins in the future even after those guys, right? Like, it was just so fast. We had, again, Joe Burrow and all of that. The NHL, same thing. They've had overlap with Sidney Crosby and with Connor McDavid, and now there's a young crop of players that are uber exciting, like Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini, and it feels as though like USA Hockey has maintained their momentum in terms of young stars that are coming up. From a who are the faces of the league standpoint, the NHL to me does not have a problem moving forward. Basketball is different. Globally, they have guys that work in all kinds of different markets. Like they have. Now it's all about, what do they call them? Not micro audiences, but something like that, where if you look at the internet, someone can have like 5 million followers, and I have no idea who they are. I've never heard of them in my life. Yeah. There's all these little pockets. Everybody has their own algorithm on Netflix that they get to see. Like we're watching our own customized shows. We're listening to our own customized music. Like it's very niche. It doesn't feel as like big anymore. But the NBA was always the biggest one in terms of like these are the stars. And Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James were the faces of basketball for 2 decades. And now, when I look at the future of the NBA, I'm not as sure who those guys are that are inheriting USA basketball. Like, again, globally, the sport has never been stronger. You have Luka Doncic in LA. He's going to be one of the faces of the league. I still believe that Jokic is one of the most underrated and underappreciated athletes in my lifetime. Like, I can't explain to someone who doesn't watch Jokic what it's like to just turn on a Tuesday where the Nuggets are playing the Chicago Bulls and watch Jokic just shove a effortless triple-double down somebody's throat with every facet of the game feeling complete offensively. Like, he is brilliant. I never thought I would see someone that I compared to Shaquille O'Neal at the center position, and I do with Jokic. Like, I think that those conversations are legitimate because he is that great. They don't have a quality player problem. Like, there's more quality players in the NBA now than there ever have been, right? Rosters are deeper. You watch a Hornets game, like the Raptors play the Hornets, and I'm like, oh, man, Concanepo, like, he's pretty good, and like Bridges is pouring it in, and like Ball is fine. Every team has some guys. But in terms of like who the faces of USA basketball are, I don't really have an answer for that. Like Anthony Edwards has been forced down our throats as like the guy. And yes, he had an incredibly exciting run, and we did the baby MJ stuff, and he seems to be less reluctant to speak to media openly and honestly and be himself than a lot of other players of his generation. But there doesn't seem to me to be someone outside of him who, by the way, a little bit of the bloom has come off the rose with that guy, just in terms of the perception and the cool factor. Like, he's cool.
Yeah.
But is it like a certainty that 5 years from now he's the face of USA basketball? I don't feel that way. Like, and so you guys mentioned to me, I think our intern Ethan put into the doc how like Cade Cunningham just got a shoe. And I'm high on Cade. Like, I think Cade, if you're talking about stock up with players from the start of the season, there's a pretty strong case that Cade's stock is up higher than anybody else's. I think Donovan Mitchell is an amazing USA basketball player that, again, is actually underrated. He played in Utah, and then he played in Cleveland, and they sucked in the playoffs last year when he had that incredible season. And so that took a bit of a step off of it. Jason Tatum is an amazing player. But again, I don't feel as though the NBA at large is overwhelmingly excited to watch a Jason Tatum game when he's healthy. Halliburton, same thing, like in the finals last year. USA basketball, for the first time in my life, does not have the clear succession plan in place in terms of who the guys are that make them feel special beyond just depth of talent, which they still have more than any other nation.
I think there's a bit of a gap. And I think they need to
gap.
win championships, Bunk, ultimately, to be that.
Yeah, but Jason Tatum has one.
He was
He didn't play on the last USA
I thought of that
USA
when you
team.
said him. Yeah,
USA went to the Olympics last time, and he couldn't get on the court, and he was the champion. So it's like the idea that you're going to get up for USA basketball and say, like, don't worry, it's like Jason Tatum's here. To
be honest, Tatum's a bit vanilla.
Yeah, but
that's
this is
what
kind of
it comes
it's
down
like
to.
when you think about the dream teams, and you think about LeBron, and you think about Curry, and you think about Wade and Kobe, and those other iterations of USA basketball. It's like when they show up internationally to an event, right? Remember the one Olympic team where they had to get a yacht to stay away from, what was that, Brazil? They were like, we got to get on a yacht because we're too famous here and too many people want our time and attention. You look back at the Dream Team doc, it's the exact same thing. It felt like, oh my God, these guys are not just amazing basketball players, they're mythical figures. And USA basketball moving forward, I don't see one mythical figure. I don't see one guy that we're looking at right now that is like, so no doubt about it, fans can't wait to see this guy. The dudes that people can't wait to see are going to be on other teams. They're going to be Wemby. They're going to be Jokic. They're going to be Luka Doncic. Like
Shea.
Sure.
Yeah.
To a lesser degree than those guys. But yeah, I don't think Shea
part
has
of
the
it,
same cachet.
Because of the parity. Like you have to win. Like it's like if you win few rings out of 5 years, you become that more.
Yes,
Kobe did that. Braun did that. KD did that. Curry did that.
No, honestly, that's a great point. I did Joe Casciaro's show a week ago, and we had this exact same conversation that the NBA shot themselves in the foot in a way that they didn't realize. By removing great teams, you also remove great champions. And in a league that needs those kinds of stars with those kind of mystiques, that has really hurt them. Anyway, we got to run, but good stuff by you today. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with Ennis and Jackie.